When you picture ancient Rome, you probably see gleaming white marble, emperors draped in purple, and gladiators fighting under a roaring crowd. Forget almost all of it, because if you had actually been born in Rome around the year 150, the odds are overwhelming that none of that was your life. Rome was the first city in human history to reach roughly 1 million people, and about 9 out of 10 of them were not senators or soldiers. They were ordinary workers, crammed into rented apartment blocks, eating porridge, sharing toilets with strangers, and quietly praying their building didn't collapse or burn down in the night. The history books remember the emperors, but the city actually ran on these invisible millions. So let's do something the movies never bother to show you. Let's live one ordinary day in this city, from the first light of dawn to the pitch black of night, in the sandals of a completely normal Roman. Not a ruler, not a hero, just you. You wake at first light, because in Rome, daylight is everything. There is no cheap way to light or heat a room, so life runs on the sun. You live on the top floor of an insula, an apartment block 5 or 6 stories high, and here is the twist a modern renter would never guess. The higher you live, the poorer you are. The ground floor has shops, thick walls, and real space, so it goes to people with money. You are up under the roof, at the top of a dark staircase, in a single rented room you might share with your whole family, or even with strangers. There is no running water up here, so every drop is carried up the stairs from a public fountain. There is no kitchen either, just a small brazier you cook on nervously, because these buildings were thrown up fast and cheap. They cracked, they leaned, and sometimes they simply collapsed, and they burned, constantly. Fire was such reliable business that one famous Roman, Crassus, grew fabulously rich by rushing to burning buildings with his own crew and offering to buy them cheap, on the spot, before agreeing to put the flames out. The Emperor Augustus finally created the vigils, a 7,000-man fire brigade, and capped how tall these blocks could rise. It barely helped. First problem of the day. You need a toilet, and your building doesn't have one. What you have is a pot in the corner. When it fills up, you either carry it down to a collection jar at the bottom of the stairs because urine was genuinely valuable and gathered by laundries to clean and bleach cloth, or, far less politely, you simply tip it out of the window into the street below. Passers-by learn to walk carefully. For the real thing, you head to a public latrine, and here, Rome's engineering is genuinely impressive. Aqueducts poured fresh water into the city, and a giant sewer, the Cloaca Maxima, carried the waste away. But privacy was never part of the plan. A latrine is a long stone bench with a row of holes cut into it and no walls between them. You sit down shoulder to shoulder with total strangers and chat while you go. Toilet paper does not exist. Instead, there is a tersorium, a sea sponge fixed to a stick, which you rinse in a little channel of running water at your feet and then hand to the next person. Everyone shares the same sponge. It is efficient, it is oddly social, and it is a near-perfect machine for spreading disease. Breakfast, the ientaculum, is barely a meal. A scrap of bread, maybe some cheese or last night's leftovers eaten standing up. Your everyday fuel is pulse, a thick grain porridge of wheat or barley. It is bland, it is cheap, and it quite literally fed the empire. And forget what you imagine Italian food to be, because there are no tomatoes, no potatoes, and no pasta as we know it. Those arrive thousands of years later from another continent. If you are a poor male citizen, you might qualify for the annona, the grain dole, where the state handed out free or cheap grain to a couple 100,000 men every single month, shipped across the sea from Egypt and North Africa. But remember, you have no real kitchen. So like millions of Romans, you eat out constantly, grabbing hot food from a thermopolium, A counter open to the street lined with warm pots, basically ancient fast food. One buried town, Pompeii, had around 80 of them. Your wine is cheap and watered down, meat is a rare treat, and almost everything is seasoned with garum, a pungent fermented fish sauce so beloved that even the poorest kitchens kept a cheap version. To us, it would smell shocking. To you, it is simply the taste of home. Now, to work. The Roman day starts at dawn, and the working part is largely finished by early afternoon. What you do depends entirely on who you are: baker, porter, builder, dyer, potter, shopkeeper, dock worker. Many trades organized into collegia, guilds that were part professional body, part social club, part funeral fund. There was no 7-day week. Instead, Romans ran on a rhythm of market days every 8th day when the countryside poured into the city to buy and sell. But there is one very Roman institution you cannot skip: the patron system. If you are a poorer citizen, you almost certainly have a patronus, a wealthier protector. Early each morning, clients like you line up at his door for the salutatio, a formal greeting where you pay your respects, and in return you receive a sportula, a small basket of food, or a handful of coins. It is part charity, part networking, part obligation. Your patron gets a visible crowd of supporters to show off and to call on when he needs them. You get help surviving another day. And looming behind all of it are the enslaved, who did a huge share of the city's labor, from the mines to the kitchens to the very baths you'll visit later. Loyalty in Rome is a currency you spend every single morning. Step outside, and the street hits you like a wave. Rome is deafening, packed, and filthy. The most crowded districts, like the Subura, are a maze of narrow lanes where laundry hangs overhead, waste runs underfoot, and the crowd never thins. A Roman poet named Juvenal wrote a furious rant about how dangerous this city was: wagons that could crush you, floods of people shoving past, and the very real risk of a chamber pot or a falling roof tile landing on your head from above. Wheeled carts were actually banned from the center during daylight to ease the crush, which means deliveries thunder through at night, and the rumble of wagons keeps you awake instead. There are no house numbers and no street signs, so you navigate by landmarks and memory. The rich glide above it all, carried through the mob on litters by their slaves. Crime is a constant threat, because the streets have almost no lighting and little policing, so after dark, simply going out means risking robbery. And everywhere, always, there is the fear of fire. In a city of timber floors, oil lamps and open flames stacked 6 stories high, one knocked-over lamp could take your building and your whole neighborhood by morning. By early afternoon, work winds down, and you head to the true heart of Roman daily life: the baths. Fed by those same aqueducts, they were everywhere, and for a tiny coin, sometimes nothing at all, almost anyone could get in, rich and poor side by side. But the baths were never really about getting clean. You move through a sequence of rooms: a hot, steamy chamber, a warm room, and a cold plunge to finish. Since soap as we know it was rare, you rub your skin with oil and then scrape it off, along with the sweat and grime, using a curved metal tool called a strigil. Around you, there is an exercise yard where people work out, and everywhere there is talk. Business deals, gossip, flirting, arguments about politics. Watch your clothes, though, because theft in the changing rooms was so common that people paid a slave just to guard them. Men and women usually bathed at different times of day. For an ordinary Roman with a cramped room and no bath of your own, this was the one real luxury you actually got. A few warm hours where the crowded, dangerous, exhausting city felt, just for a moment, like it belonged to you too. On many days, there is free entertainment, and it is genuinely spectacular. The biggest venue is not the Colosseum, It is the Circus Maximus, a chariot racing track so vast that ancient writers claimed it could hold up to 250,000 roaring people. Fans split into rival teams, the blues, the greens, the reds, and the whites, and backed them with a passion that makes modern football look calm. Riots between factions could turn deadly. Star charioteers became rich celebrities, even though a single crash could kill them in an instant. The Colosseum, seating around 50,000, hosted gladiator combat and staged animal hunts, shaded by a huge fabric awning that sailors unfurled overhead. Sometimes tokens for food or prizes were flung into the crowd, and crucially, for you, most of this was free, because emperors and politicians paid for the games out of their own pockets. A fed and entertained crowd, they knew, is a calm crowd. One bitter poet sneered that a people who once ruled themselves now craved only two things: bread and circuses. It is a harsh line, but from where you sit, up in the cheap seats, a free and thrilling afternoon in a city this hard is nothing to sneer at. As the sun sinks, it is time for cena, the main meal of the day. If you were wealthy, this is the famous scene. Guests reclining on couches around a low table, course after course, deep into the evening. For you, it is far humbler. Bread, some beans or vegetables, perhaps porridge again, and meat only now and then, usually a little pork, if you are lucky. You eat by the flicker of a small oil lamp because the moment the sun is gone, the city drops into real darkness. There are no streetlights anywhere. Beyond your door lies a black maze of alleys where thieves wait, so the sensible choice is to bolt the door and stay in. Outside, the carts that were banned by day finally rumble through, hauling goods under the moon. Your day ends the way it began. Early, out of necessity, on a thin mattress in a cramped room high above a city that never fully sleeps. And tomorrow, you will get up and do all of it again. So that was your day. Not marble and laurels, but porridge, a shared sponge, a bucket of water hauled up endless stairs, and an afternoon at the baths that made the rest of it bearable. The life of an ordinary Roman was crowded, precarious, and astonishingly modern in its problems. Rent you could barely afford, food grabbed on the go, a landlord's building that might literally fall on you, and free public entertainment to keep you distracted from all of it. When we picture the greatness of Rome, we picture the emperors and their monuments. But the empire actually ran on 1,000,000 people just like you, waking at dawn, surviving the day, and starting over. That, far more than any marble statue, is what daily life in ancient Rome was really like. And it leaves us with a bigger question, one we'll keep asking here. Whatever age you had been born into, what would an ordinary day have actually felt like? Because that is the real story of history, and it usually belongs to the people whose names we never learn.